Morning folks, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and we're starting this video down here at the Pathfinder Outdoor Classroom because it's a good place for me to have a blackboard to kind of put bullet points up that you can look at and copy from later. What I want to talk about in this video, and it may turn into kind of a mini series of videos, but I want to talk about basic camping and the top 5 categories of items you need to look at. Now let me caveat this video with the fact that we're really not talking at this point about backpack camping. I've done lots and lots of videos on backpacking, how to pack a backpack, backpack camps, the things that you put in, take out, how you pack them, how much weight, all those things I've done lots and lots of videos on. What I want to concentrate now on is camping more with conveyance, whether that be an ATV, a POV, a boat, a kayak, a canoe, your Jeep, your truck, whatever the case may be, you've got conveyance to carry some things that you're going to take camping with you. So you're talking about more of a base camping scenario. And I've got 5 basic categories of items that you want to look at. Now you can obviously put as much stuff into a vehicle as you can stuff in there to take camping. But there's such a thing as having too much, right? So you have to look at the situation, the environment, what your plans are during that trip. You have to look at the weather, changes in weather, and the season, obviously, okay? So take this 5 for what it's worth because it kind of follows the survival priorities somewhat, but it also gives you a very good reference point or jumping off point to think about the things you're going to pack for camping. And then we'll talk about the categories one by one as we go, all right? So the first one is obviously tools, right? Just like in a survival scenario, just like if we're backpacking, just like if we're putting a bug out bag together, anything like that, we are thinking about tools because tools allow us to build other things that we may not have within that kit and also to repair things that may be within that kit if they get damaged or broken, okay? So tools are gonna be our number one. How extravagant you with that is up to you. We're gonna talk through some basics here in a few minutes. Shelter. Your shelter system should be next, and that includes the clothing on your back. Just like in the 5x5 system here at the Pathfinder School, clothing is your first line of defense and shelter against the elements, okay? But beyond that, we want to make sure that we cover the in, on, under concept. Something to sleep in, something to sleep on, something to sleep under. Again, that can be as extravagant as you want to get. It could be as simple as a hammock, tarp, underquilt, overquilt that you're going to attach to the back of your vehicle or just strap between 2 trees and park your vehicle close to it to camp, or it could be a full-on family-sized tent or a smaller bivvy of some kind. It depends on your plan, but shelter is going to be the key. The next one is going to be water procurement and containment. You're gonna want something that you can contain water in to carry it over distance, and you're going to want something that you can procure water with and subsequently disinfect that water if you're collecting water from a ground resource or off the landscape, okay? Cooking, that includes fire building, so fire building implements, and it includes all cook implements that you're going to use to cook your food. So it's a fairly large category, but it doesn't have to be too complicated, okay? Again, depending on what you want to do, the more you want to do, the more you have to take, all right? Camp furnishings and lighting are your last one. And these are just, number one, lighting could be as simple as your headlight or a lantern, or it could be as extravagant as having, tiki torches and all those kind of things. But camp furnishings in general and lighting are your last category. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk through the basics of these 5 categories and what I think should be like the basis of that kit. And then you can decide the things that you're going to add or subtract from it to cover these 5 categories when you decide to go camping. Now, when we get into the tool section of this thing, first of all, let me set this up by saying, stay away from the thinking or thought process of, I need this and this, if they're already on your person, right? You're already gonna have a belt knife. You're already gonna have something in your pocket, be that an SAK or a multi-tool. In this situation, I would prefer a multi-tool because I may have fishing gear, hunting gear, trapping gear, things that I need tools to manipulate, repair, or adjust. And a multi-tool will give you those options that an SAK may not always give you. Although I always prefer an SAK in my pocket, there's no reason not to have both. So if you're carrying a multi-tool in your belt, you can still have a smaller SAK in your pocket, and you've got the best of both worlds. That's my personal opinion on that. So when we talk about tools here, we're going to talk about what I would call the big three, which is the major three camping tools that I would recommend anyone have. Again, if you have conveyance, and we're talking about conveyance in this video, let's remember that. So, shovel, axe, buck saw. Pretty simple, all right? Pretty simple. Now, because you're scaling things bigger, because you have conveyance, when I say buck saw, I mean a buck saw or a bow saw. I don't necessarily mean a folding saw at this point. Now, you could use something as large as a Silky Big Boy as your choice for a saw, and this thing will get a lot of work done around camp. There's absolutely no question about that. However, if I'm going to have conveyance, I'm probably not going to carry a folding saw unless it's a folding buck saw. Or I'm going to carry a full-on bow saw because I've got the room to do it, and they're much more rigid, much more sturdy. They get a lot of work done, and if you're bucking down firewood, which is the reason you would generally carry a saw, would either be to clear trail if you're driving somewhere, whether that be, again, ATV, POV, Jeep, whatever it is, you may need to clear trail. If you're clearing trail, a larger saw is going to do the job faster. There's nothing wrong with this Silky Big Boy. This thing will cut a lot of wood. I've cleared a lot of trails with this thing on my four-wheeler and things like that. But if I can scale up, I'm going to do it. If I can't, this is where I'm going. If I can scale up, I'm going to go to something like a folding buck saw or some type of actual full-on bow saw. So again, in this video, brand specifics aren't important. What's important is that you have a good piece of gear that's quality, that you can stake your life on if you need to, and that you can trust to camp with for years to come. So when it comes to a saw, just get a good quality buck saw or a bow saw, all right? Axe, I'm going kind of backwards up the list here. For this situation, again, we have conveyance. So the minimum axe I would go with would be something like a boy's axe size. Something that is, you know, at least armpit to cupped hand in length. That's got a minimum of a 2-pound head on it, like this Council Tool Hudson Bay. That would be the minimum I would carry, okay? If I've got the room, I'm gonna carry more of a felling axe, okay? Something with a longer handle in it, over 28 inches, something with a head weight over 2 pounds, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, up to 3. Something I can do some damage to wood with because again, I'm carrying this stuff for 2 reasons. Number 1, trail clearing. Number 2, firewood. So if that's my intent and I'm not doing craft work and things like that when I'm camping, I want the heavy duty tools that can put in the work, okay? All right, so now let's talk about a shovel, all right? What I would tell you is there's no need to carry a full length shovel. You don't need to go that dramatic, but I would have something with a fairly long handle on it. A couple good shovels to choose from would be this full size cold steel. I like this because it's one piece construction, it has no moving parts. You can replace the wooden handle if you have to on the fly. It's got a nice wide blade on it. So you can dig trenching around tents. You can dig fire pits. You can dig yourself out of a hole that you get stuck in with your vehicle and things like that. You need something that's got a long enough handle you can get some leverage to dig with, and something with a wide enough blade on it you can remove a lot of dirt at a time. Now, you could also go with something like the old Vietnam folding style shovel with the wooden handle, or this Council Tool fire shovel, which I've cut down, okay, to make it shorter, but it's still got, you know, an 18, 19 inch handle on it, and it has the folding pick and the shovel, so it can do double duty. A lot of those old Vietnam aim shovels, same thing. You can still find those in good condition. You can find something like that that's got the shovel that can be set out to some type of an adze for the dirt and also a pick, then you've got a bonus, okay? Not necessary, something to think about. Now, obviously, whenever we carry tools of any kind, we need to carry something to maintain those tools on the trail or in camp. So we're going to have probably some type of a carborundum stone, some type of honing device, some type of stropping device, axe puck, if we're carrying a nice axe. Those are the things that we want to carry to be able to touch things up on the trail if we have to. And they're really a sub piece of gear that you're going to carry in kind of a repair kit that we'll talk about later, which is going to be your multi-purpose box for doing repairs and things like that and maintaining your tools on the fly. As far as tools go, shovel, axe, buck saw, those are the big ones, or bow saw. And then what you have in your pockets, right? Multi-tool, SAK, belt knife. Those things all count as tools as well. But we're mainly talking about tools we're going to pack away in our vehicle and not have on our person at this point. Okay. So let's jump to the next category, which is shelter, right? Now, you can see I've got parentheses here. I've got clothing / in, on, under, IOU. Real simple to remember. As far as clothing goes, again, we're not talking about necessarily the clothing you're going to pack for a camping trip, like extra socks, underwear, t-shirts, shorts, all that kind of stuff. That's not what we mean. What I mean is something you're going to keep in your vehicle most of the time. That's going to be packed away. And in my case, I'll tell you exactly what that is. I keep a hoodie and a raincoat in my truck, even this time of year. Here we are, late May, almost June, right? I keep a hoodie and a raincoat in my Jeep all the time. My father-in-law used to say, never leave the house without a jacket and your lunch, okay? And I follow that mentality. I don't leave to go anywhere for very long that I don't have something in the vehicle like a raincoat and a hoodie, like I said, and something to snack on if I need to, right? Some kind of lunch if I have to have it. But I would say that in the clothing category, you make sure that at this time of year, you have something to warm you up if it gets chilly at night and something to keep the rain off of you. And then as the seasons progress and it gets colder, you have to bump that up, okay? But for me now, this time of year, just a simple hoodie and a raincoat stuffed in the Jeep underneath the seat works perfect, okay? Now, the IOU, we talked about that in videos past. We need something to sleep in, something to sleep on, and something to sleep under. The reason for that is we need something to sleep on top of that will battle conduction from the ground, or something to sleep on that is an underquilt that will battle convection if we're sleeping elevated. Now you get the same effect from a mattress on a cot, which we'll talk about in a minute. It takes care of any of that convection issue that you may have from underneath the cot and gives you an air mattress to sleep on top of. Then you need something to sleep inside of to trap body heat. That could be as simple as a sleeping bag, could be as simple as some type of whoopee configuration or a swagman roll. Whatever the weather for that time of year and the terrain and the environment and things like that dictate, that's what you want to take. For me, this time of year, the Wiggies lightweight Freedom Shelter is really the bomb. It can be too hot, and if it is, I can open it up. But when it gets chilly at night, because it still dips down into the low 50s, and last week, a week before last, at a class we had out here, and we slept in the woods with the students, it got down to right at 40. I had that Wiggies ultralight Freedom Shelter or lightweight Freedom Shelter, and that thing was the bomb. It kept me perfectly warm down to my skivvies. So always have a decent sleeping bag packed away in your truck as well with your camping gear. And then if you choose to carry something like your backpack with you, that can be where you store something like a swagman roll that you may pull out of the backpack because it's too hot for your sleeping bag. And then you need something to sleep under. So tent, tarp, whatever you choose, the way you camp, whether it's a bivvy, whether it's a full-on tent, whether it's a tarp, whether it's tarp and hammock, whatever you choose. We're going to talk about something here in a minute. I'm going to show you some B-roll of a footage that's got this shelter system pretty well put together in a one Tigris configuration over here that I use quite a bit. All right, so when you're talking about a shelter system, this is one of the best I've found if you're not using a hammock. If you're sleeping on the ground and you're by yourself, you want something that's easily transportable by ATV, POV, a Jeep, a small pickup truck, it doesn't matter. This system works well, okay? There's a couple other things in the picture here, but what you see is the one Tigris backwoods bungalow. It's got the Pathfinder poncho poles underneath the canopy to spread it out and give you headroom. You've got a simple Walmart cot in there and the Pathfinder mattress. You've got my old Freedom Shelter light or no, excuse me, my forest quilt is in that bag right there. And then there's a chair and a light. We'll talk about those in a few minutes with camp furnishings. So the cot would be part of your camp furnishings, obviously, but the mattress itself, the forester's quilt, and the tent would be your in on under, and you're just enhancing that with camp furniture by adding the cot, okay? But that gets you off the ground completely. The mattress gives you plenty of protection from convection underneath the cot, gives you a nice comfortable way to sleep. And again, with the forester's quilt, the Wiggy's bag, Swagman roll, anything like that to cover yourself up with and trap body heat, and you're good to go. Any type of conveyance you've got, this system will fit it pretty well. And I found this thing to be about the best of the best when it comes to ground sleeping or sleeping in a tent. Okay, so that gives you just a quick look at the in on under shelter type system and what I have found works for me. You know, any type of a hammock system, overquilt, underquilt, and a nice tarp, whether it be hammockgear.com, the Pathfinder Jungle Hammock, whatever you choose, whatever brand you choose, doesn't matter. Again, it's not brand specific. And then as far as a small tent goes, if you've got a decent foldable cot in there and a good mattress and something to sleep inside of, like a sleeping bag of some sort, you're gonna be gold. You don't have to spend a lot of money necessarily to do this stuff. You can find a lot of this stuff at thrift stores and things like that, use online trade groups like the Pathfinder Trade Blanket. You can find lots of this stuff to just get outdoors, because that's really the important part of all of this. All right, so now we talk about water procurement and disinfection, okay? Again, bigger scale. We're not talking about grails, we're not talking about water bottles in the fire, boiling one water bottle at a time. We're talking about a bigger scenario where we can carry larger things. How much water and what we carry really, again, depends on the size of our conveyance and what we can handle. For me, I like to carry 10 gallons of water at a minimum, 2 5-gallon jerry cans. One of those just a standard military style water can, the other one a lifesaver water filter can that I can actually just take it down to the creek, take it down to a pond, take it down to a lake, fill that bad boy up, pump up the pressure, and run every bit of water through that filter. And then I've got something I can filter 5 gallons of water with at a time, and a spare 5-gallon can as well. If you can't carry something that large, I do like carrying I think they're half that size in liters cans as well, and you can carry those, and they're easy for kids and women to carry. And they do make a lifesaver can that's smaller if you choose to go that route. For me, once I get to the point where I can't carry jerry cans because my conveyance won't allow it, then I'm going to carry something like this, which is just a Mountain Safety Research heavy duty water bladder. I've had this thing for years and years and years, and it's been used and abused. It's 6 liters. So again, it's not that 10-gallon minimum, but you've got to back that up by the size of your conveyance. But this thing's really easy just to hang in a tree, plug a Sawyer filter right into the front of it, and let it work, okay? So that's the beauty of a system like this. And it is fairly small and compact to put in your kit, in your truck, or whatever the case may be, your canoe, your kayak, if you can't afford to carry the jerry cans. It's important to be able to filter that water somehow when you are camping. You're not gonna have necessarily the time, if you're enjoying the outdoors, to sit and boil water, boil water, boil water. That stuff is for survival. It's not for everyday camping. For everyday camping, you wanna filter that water if you can. And so whatever the best filtration option for you is that works best for you, that's what I would use. But I would say that water cans are your best bet if you can carry them. A heavy duty water bladder like this one is made out of heavy duty material, not the plastic ones you put inside of a backpack, but something heavier duty like this, like an expedition size water bladder would be the next bet. Okay, so the next thing on our list is fire, camp cooking, and cooking implements. And again, you can make this as complicated or as easy as you want to, depending on what you're doing. If you're serving at a hunting camp and you're the cook, you might have more stuff you have to bring. If you've got your whole family with you on a camping trip, you may have more stuff you have to bring. If you're by yourself, you can keep this really, really simple. Now, I won't say that you can't use a backpacking stove to cook your food at camp, even in a more of a base camp scenario, because you obviously can. But if you're going to use something larger in scale, like a 10-inch skillet of some kind or something like that, because you want to cook a nice big skillet meal, maybe you're cooking for 2, something like that, you're going to want something a little sturdier than the typical isobutane type stove that you can put a bigger surface area on, like a larger skillet or a larger pot to cook your meals, okay? We'll talk about those things in a couple minutes. So when it comes to stoves in general, cook stoves for camping, you could go with a Coleman 2-burner stove, 20 bucks at a yard sale somewhere. So as long as you're carrying fuel for that stove and you've got it operational and maintained well, you're good to go, and you can cook on 2 burners, and it doesn't take up a lot of room, again, depending on your type of conveyance, and that dictates everything. Or you could go to a large 3-burner Coleman stove if that's what you want to, or the Cook Partner type stoves. And again, depending on the stove, depends on the fuel, depends on how much room it takes. When you go to Cook Partner stoves, which I carry in my Jeep and in my overlanding trailer, you're talking about having to have a hose and a propane tank, a large propane tank, okay? Those are the things you need when you're talking about propane stoves. Or you could just use canisters depending on the stove you have. If it's a Primus or a newer Coleman or something like that, it could just be a single canister. However, those don't last for a very long time if you're going on a multi-day trip. Fuel is easy to obtain, although white gas is fairly expensive nowadays. But you can get stoves that burn multi-fuel, so they'll actually burn high-octane gasoline, unleaded gas, as well as white gas. So you can get that a little cheaper. And that may be easier to come by than a propane refill out on the road somewhere. So that's something to think about depending on how you're camping. If you're camping on a river or something like that where you can't get to any type of stores for refills on things like propane, then fuel may be the way to go for you, some kind of a gas fuel, okay? I'm gonna show you one stove here that is a retro stove. We've talked about, using backpacking stoves. We talked about the bigger Coleman stoves, things like that. Talked about Cook Partner. And then you could also get an electric setup. I use them quite often in my Jeep on just an Anchor converter there, and I plug it into the Anchor converter into the 110. And you've got things like Stovoltics. That's just basically a cook pot that heats up very quickly. You've got hot plates you can buy right off of Amazon for 25 bucks. You can plug into that dude and skillet cook on top of that fairly easily with anything up to a 10-inch skillet. So there's easy and simple ways to do it. It really depends on what you prefer. I'm gonna show you this stove only because if you're traveling somewhere where it's hard to get a refill on a tank of some kind, and you have the ability to carry a small fuel can or two like this of white gas or high octane unleaded, depending on the stove you have again, you can carry something like this and have a pretty good system with you. So let's talk about this real quick. So this is an old Coleman system. I don't remember what the date is on the bottom of the tank, and that's how you usually can find out, but I think this is a 60s or 70s model. And the way this is set up is the stove is inside of a container that was also set up to be used for cooking, okay? So you're kind of killing a lot of birds with one stone with this kit, as long as you don't mind cooking in the aluminum. Now, you can see the way this is set up, it has this bracket that is riveted to it. It has one here and it has one here. And this is in no way, shape, or form any kind of a new system. This has been around since the 40s, okay? And you just take the handle that's bent and you slide it in, and you have a pan or you have a cook pot, depending on where you use the handle, okay? So this system works fairly well. All the old Palco Scout cook sets had the same handle design like this, and they work fairly well, okay? You got to remember that heat expands metal. So what happens with these is over time, the heat will expand this gap and the handles will kind of get loose. So you just got to bend them back a little bit with a pair of pliers or a pair of channel locks and you're good to go, all right? But they're sturdy enough that it's not going to fall off of there if you want to use this system to cook in. And it also stores your stove. So now you've got a single burner white gas stove. And again, I had this one refurbished for me. This is 1073 is when this one was made. It says on the bottom, Wichita, Kansas. It's a made in the USA Coleman stove. I believe, it's the 502. It's the 502. Let me get that right. Coleman 502. You can buy the 502 without these cans and things like that. You can get things that go on top of them that I have that make them heaters for inside a shelter. There's lots of versatility with a small stove like this, and it doesn't take up a lot of room if you're packing it, and they're very, very reliable in all weather, where isobutane and propane can be a little bit of a pain at colder temperatures. White gas doesn't have that problem. So a stove system like this one with a couple of spare fuel cans is a great way to overcome that. I don't generally cook in this container, not because it's aluminum, but because I've got a stove stored in there that's got fuel in it, and I'm afraid that there may be fuel inside the container. Maybe that's just me being a little bit oversensitive, but I generally cook on other implements, but this is a great storage box for the whole system so it doesn't get beat up or banged up, and it works really, really well. You can pick stuff like this up used. Depending on where you pick it up, it's gonna be, how much you pay for it. I had this one completely refurbished, so I've got a little bit of extra money in this one, but it's a great system for a base camp for one guy. Okay, so that's just a little bit about camp stoves. Now, obviously, if you're gonna make a campfire, you've got the tools to process the wood with you, and then you just need to have your fire starting kit, whatever that may be that you're going to use to start fire with. That includes things like fire starting devices that are instant flame, like cigarette lighters, things like that, to matches, to mini infernos or tinder quicks, any of those types of things you want to put into some kind of a box that is your fire starting kit that goes with your cooking implements. And then obviously, if you're using a stove of some sort, a ferro rod will light those, a lighter will light those, any kind of a sparking device will light those stoves fairly easily, including a welding sparker, which work really good for lighting some of these stoves and last a long time, and you can replace the flint if you're so inclined. So if you want to go old school, that's a good way to do that, okay? Now, once we get past that, now if we're going to use a campfire, there's other implements for cooking that we may want to carry compared to just cooking on a stove. If we're just going to cook on a stove, we may or may not want some kind of a baker, but we can always just turn one of the bush pots on the side and put a rack inside of it and use it for an oven device to bake in if we want to. If we're going to use a campfire to cook, then we may want some type of a baker, like our reflector oven that we just released a few weeks ago. That's out of stock right now. We'll be back in stock in a couple, 3 weeks. They're being made. They're made right here in Ohio and USA. You may want some kind of a folding grill rack. The system that I use for that has got the stove in it and the rack and a cutting board in one bag. It works really well. I'll show that to you now in case you haven't seen it. And then we'll talk about the implements I would take to cook in if I were just using a camp stove that would also cross over to cooking over a fire. So for me, if I can car camp, if I got the luxury of carrying something this large, it's not very wide, it's just this direction. I can slide this in against something very easily, against water cans or whatever, and it doesn't take up much room, and it's not really that heavy. Probably weighs 5 or 6 pounds, all said and done, if I had to guess. And again, that's just a guess. But you've got a single pouch that the actual folding grill comes in. And then underneath that folding grill, trapped in the legs of that folding grill, I have the Pathfinder reflector oven and a cutting board. Okay, that makes a real simple system for like surf and turf camping, things like that, or camping, cooking over a campfire. Having that grill rack gives you the ability to put pots, pans, and things like that over there without having to either makeshift something or teeter something around coals in the fire that might dump over. We're going to be plenty secure on that grill rack, and you can cook steaks and things like that right on the rack. Okay, so that takes care of campfire business and then cooking on stoves. And now we have to think about what we're going to cook with. And we can keep this really, really simple like everything else, or we can get more extravagant depending on the amount of people that we're cooking for and the types of foods we plan to cook, all right? Okay, so to me, your number one asset for camp cooking is a skillet, all right? A good deep skillet with a lid. The lid makes it more versatile. If it's got a domed lid like this one does and a rim around that lid, you can use this for baking, and you can use it for a Dutch oven as well, okay? If you look historically at skillets, and I don't want to get into a big conversation about skillets, all right? Because we've already had those conversations. If you look historically, Horace Kephart wrote in his book in the early 1900s, he talked about things that you should take with you camping. He talked about skillets. There's a few things he had to say about skillets, and you can look at that. This is the original version of Woodcraft and Camping, so I don't know any reprints where it might be, but on page number 120, he's talking about camp implements for cooking, and he talks about skillets. And what he says is this, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase it, okay, instead of reading it out of the book for you. Number one, he prefers a skillet with a folding handle, not a detachable handle, because it's just something else to lose. Number two, he prefers that the handle fold underneath so that things can be stored inside the skillet. And while he doesn't give a size on the skillet, he does say that all your plates should be 9.5 inches and they should nest inside the skillet, which tells me that his skillet was 10 inches, okay? And so a 10-inch skillet would be my preference, okay, for camping If I'm carrying nothing else but the skillet, I'm gonna cook all my food in a skillet, then I want 10 inches. An 8-inch skillet, to me, is the perfect size for one man, but you might want a bush pot or something to go with that. Although you can cook quite a bit in an 8-inch skillet, a 10-inch is gonna be better, okay? Now, the book, Complete Book of Camping, written 1969. What he talks about in here is he talks about that Palco cook set that we discussed a minute ago that has those detachable handles that Horace Kephart doesn't like, that Coleman used on the 502 container that we talked about a minute ago. The Palco cook sets all came with 10-inch skillets. Most of the time, 2 of them nested inside. So one was like 9.5 and the other one was like 10, okay? So he talks about having 2 10-inch skillets because he talks about that Palco cook set. And we've talked about that several times in videos past because that's what I've based my entire stainless steel set on, is that nestability of that Palco cook set, and then made improvements based on research, based on history, like the folding underneath handle type thing that we just talked about, okay? So here's what I'd say. A skillet is your number one asset. Pick your poison, okay? Make sure that you got a good deep skillet. Make sure it's got a good domed lid on it with some ridges on it so you can use it for a Dutch oven. You got a very versatile skillet there. If you need a pot, match it to your skillet. You got an 8-inch skillet, 2-quart bush pot. A 10-inch skillet, 3-quart bush pot. Do you need another pot on top of that? They talk about carrying coffee pots in most of the books. And even the Palco cook set came with a separate coffee pot. And some of them have percolators in them, some of them don't. It really depends on what type of coffee you drink and how fussy you are, okay? You can boil water in a deep skillet. You can boil water in a bush pot. So if you're making instant coffee or cowboy coffee, you can do it in either one of those. If you prefer percolated coffee or French press coffee, then you may want to carry a separate coffee pot. But for keeping it simple, you really only need a good skillet for frying and Dutch oven use, things like that, and then a good pot for cooking other things in or boiling things in that give you the convenience of being able to do 2 things at once, okay? Now, as far as peripheral things that you need to carry to cook with, aside from containers, right? So we're talking about cooking utensils in general. 99% of stuff that you want to do, you can get done with a fork and a knife. If you got a belt knife, that's a good substitute for a camp cooking knife most of the time, as long as you don't have a really heavy belt knife. You could always put some kind of a folder that's in your pocket to use as a camp knife, and that's not a problem for cooking tasks and things like that. And if you've got a fork in your kit already, in your mess kit of some sort, then a fork will do a lot of tasks for you, and you can flip meat and all those types of things with it. You can even get under an egg and flip an egg if you wanted to. But what I would say is, because we have conveyance, let's right tool, right job it a little bit, okay? And I would say there's 3 things that you want: a pair of tongs, a spatula, and a serving spoon, right? A larger spoon that you can get larger amounts of material out of a pot or a pan with that you can put on a plate, a spatula for turning things easier that you're cooking, and then a pair of tongs for grabbing things and flipping things like meat. You've got those 3 things, and you've got a knife of some sort, whether it's a pocket knife, a camp knife, or a dedicated knife, then you're in pretty good shape. Now, you could add things to that. You could add pastry cutters, things like that, and sometimes I do that. I have that in my main kit, a pastry cutter, but you could substitute that with a fork easy enough, okay? So don't overcomplicate it if you don't have to, but take the things that you need. You might want a meat thermometer, depending on what you're cooking. There's lots of things that you may want to take with you, a biscuit cutter of some sort if you wanted to. But the main things I would say, as far as the mainstay goes, are those 3 things plus a knife. Okay, last category, camp furniture and lighting, okay? We talked a little bit about some of the camp furniture over there at the Backwoods Bungalow. There's a cot in there, and there's a folding chair in there. For a small camp like that and your tailgate for a table, you probably have enough. If you want to get a little bit more extravagant with that, carry a table with you. And I do that a lot of times in my Jeep. I carry a front runner folding chair, which is a larger folding chair than the one I have in the bungalow. And then I carry a folding 4-foot lifetime table. Those things work a treat as a camp table, and they're perfect for that. You can adjust the height of the legs to get it where you need it, to go with the chair that you brought, and get it comfortable for you to work at and cook on and things like that. And then, of course, if you've got a truck or a Jeep, you've got a tailgate you can work off as well. I've got the mountain hatch attachment on the back of my tailgate, so I can use that for cooking, cutting board, whatever I want. And then, of course, if you have something like a teardrop, you have a built-in kitchen in that thing, okay? But what I would tell you is that camp furnishing can be kept very simple. If you need a table, bring it. If you don't, don't. Bring a couple chairs to sit around the campfire, sit around the camp, And then again, if you want to take a cot that's small and folds up really easy to a package, about the size of a loaf of bread, then you can get that Walmart Ozark cot, and it works fine. I haven't tore it up yet. I've got 2 of them. I carry one in my Jeep, and I've got one of them that I use here in camp, bouncing around, things like that. And they work a treat, and they're only about $50, something like that. So again, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get outdoors. You just have to be kind of selective in what you buy and how you want to camp. And keep your camp furnishings very simple. Now, camp lighting, here's what I would tell you with the lighting part of it. We talked about gas stoves a little bit, and there's plenty of gas lanterns out there still to this day, and you can still buy kerosene lanterns anywhere you want to. And I love kerosene lanterns for nostalgia. However, they're kind of a pain to carry around because they really need to be in a wooden box. The same thing with a Coleman style lantern or a fuel lantern that matches the fuel to your stove. And that's the advantage. You got one fuel that runs 2 things. But those wick type pressure lanterns can be a little bit of a pain. They can be a little bit finicky. They do put off a ton of light, but they're going to eat up part of your fuel reserve that you're using for cooking if you're using that for lighting. What I would say is, in my opinion, electric lighting is the win, okay? You're most likely going to have things to charge up electric things if you are camping anyway in this day and age, from your cell phone to your GPS to your cameras and things like that. So just a simple light like this one off Amazon that has multiple settings on it, that's USB chargeable, and this one's USB-C chargeable. So it matches every other thing I've got. And I'm already carrying a solar panel to charge those things with anyway. I can recharge this light from that or from my brick, and it makes it real simple. Obviously, again, stay away from that backpack mentality. We're probably gonna have a headlight, obviously, in our bag. This is for move around camp lighting, walking around, things like that, sitting while you're fishing by the bank, sitting on the table playing cards with your wife or your buddy, wherever the case may be. This light's good for that, okay? So I would stay with electric style lighting, whatever brand you choose to get. This is just some generic brand called Tough Light off Amazon. I've had this thing for probably 5 years, and I have yet to destroy it. And I have beat this thing. I've left it on the side of the four-wheeler running around. I've hung it off the outside of my backpack. I've dropped it on the ground, dropped it in the mud, dropped it in the rocks, and the thing still works like brand new. And I don't think this thing was over $40 when I bought it. Now, again, that's 5 years ago. I don't know what they cost now. The Streamlight makes one similar, but it's more money. I have one of those in the backwoods bungalow that you saw in that clip. This one's the Tough Light, and this is the one that I carry most of the time, just about everywhere I go, including in the Jeep. All right, listen, guys, I know this is a fairly lengthy video, but what I wanted to do was I want to start expanding on some things because I really believe that all of this stuff is about getting in the outdoors. It's about having fun. It's about enjoying life. And there's way more to being in the outdoors than tarp shelters and fires. So I want to start expanding on what I'm doing and what I'm teaching. I teach survival for a living. I teach bushcraft for a living. I've got 1,000 videos on YouTube on those subjects. So I want to expand my repertoire a little bit into more camping-based stuff, overlanding-based stuff, adventure-type stuff, more on the water's edge fishing stuff, more hunting stuff, things like that. And I thought a good place to start would be with a basic camping kit. And we'll expand on this because there are lots of things beyond this. This is just, I'm getting ready to put a camp kit together. Obviously, if you've got a vehicle that's prepared at all, you've already got a first aid kit in there. I carry one in my Jeep all the time with the essentials in it for first aid. And you're gonna have the things that are on your person, your EDC most every day, belt knife, SAK, multi-tool, those things. So it's worth talking about things beyond that, I think, that we're going to camp with. And so we'll expand from this into some of the more peripheral things that may go in that camping kit, like maintenance and repair and those type things. We'll go into that as we get further down the line, but I wanted to start at a jumping off point for beginners. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your support. I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Meanwhile, go visit our website at selfrelianceoutfitters.com. We have some great outdoor camping gear available to you every day. Thanks, guys.